Hello and welcome to another of AFC's Zoom meetings. We gather here to bring you the latest information direct from the Heartland. I'm Judy Friedman-Kadish, Director of Americans for a Safe Israel, also known as AFC. And right now we are busy planning our next Chizuk mission to Israel, which will be from May 2nd to May 11th. It'll be a very, very exciting combination of visiting and volunteering. I had put something out that said that everybody should be signing up for SARL. There is a possibility. I have already put in my application for SARL, and I hope that you will too if you are planning on coming. There is a chance that we will be volunteering with a different group that is a little bit more flexible and we have a specific job that we know that they'd like us to do. So we'll be, as always with AFC missions, we stay flexible. But as always, it will guarantee to be more of an insider, influencer experience than you will find anywhere else. So I hope many of you are planning to be with us. Today, we are thrilled to have Daniel Luria, Executive Director of Ateret Cohanim and spokesperson for Ateret Cohanim for the last 23 years. We're so thrilled to have him with us, joining us today. Ateret Cohanim Israel is a nonprofit organization strengthening Jewish roots in the heart of Jerusalem. Their mission includes ensuring that a united Jerusalem stays in Jewish hands. Dan recently summarized the current war and Ateret Cohanim's part in it. In this religious war over the inheritance, Ateret Cohanim is saying clearly to the world, this true son of Abraham has the natural, ethical, historical, and legal right to purchase and live in safety in every or any Jewish neighborhood in Yerushalayim. On a personal note, Dan made Aliyah in 1995 from Australia.
Yes.
He's married with 5 children, lives in Ma'ale Adumim, a proud Zionist settler occupying his homeland in Judea and Samaria, part of his indigenous people in the land of Israel. So welcome, Dan, and we are really excited to hear what you have to say about what is happening in Jerusalem and environs. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Judy. It's always a pleasure to do anything with AFC, whether it be talking, walking around. From the time that I met your mother, Zichrona Livracha, we hit it off, and ever since, there's always a nice feeling in the heart when I do anything connected with AFC because of her. I'm actually speaking tonight in her memory and in her honor. For you, for my father, whose Yortzeit was actually yesterday, for the soldiers, unfortunately, some who have been killed, for those that are injured, may they all have a refuah shlema. May we see all the hostages returned now, as soon as possible. May we see the defeat of Hamas, and may all of Am Israel, in Israel and outside of Israel, be protected. That's at the outset. I will actually jump to the very end. Because maybe some of the things that I say give a bad feeling, or a person may feel negative. Don't worry. Everything is going to be okay. We are on the most amazing process of Geula, and at the end, we're the ones that are always going to be standing. All the great empires that thought they could destroy the Jewish people, massacres, annihilations, they're bylines in history books. And today, the Jewish people, against the odds, after 3,000 years of non-stop hatred and anti-Semitism, we are the ones that are here, and we're going to be here to stay. So I say that at the outset. I thought I would actually start with a little bit of news. I don't know how many of you realize it, but last week, Ateret Cohanim and you'll understand the connection very shortly with the war, which is called the El Aqsa War, El Aqsa Flood, because everything for the Arab world centers around Jerusalem. The missiles coming from Gaza, many of them had Al-Quds or Jerusalem written on those missiles. The El Aqsa Flood, because that's what they want. Yes, we're fighting up north. We're fighting down south. We're fighting in Yesha, Judea and Samaria. But at the heart of everything, what this Arab world wants is Jerusalem, Yerushalayim. What they refer to as either El Aqsa or Al-Quds. Anyway, going back to the news, last week, we moved into a very large property, the largest property that we've ever moved into, in the middle of the Shiloach, next to the original synagogue, Beit Knesset, that we found hidden behind illegal Arab building. That in itself was a phenomenal story. But now we've got this huge property that Arabs have illegally taken and squatted on and used as a car park. Today it's in our hands, number one, because we made it happen. Maybe number one, because God let it happen. We wanted it to happen. And there was a huge change in the thinking of the police. 3-4 years ago, when we tried to get it back, there wasn't that much help from the police or the Border Patrol police. Today, the police are talking zero tolerance. Molotov cocktails were thrown at our houses 2 months ago. There's no questions. There's not maybe try and find them. They were shot and killed. 2 Arabs who tried to kill, maim, destroy, they themselves were killed. There is a zero tolerance of the police and the Border Patrol police to any hatred and violence. People are being arrested, even for doing things on the internet. Now, how long this change will last for is another question. But so far, what we're seeing is phenomenal, very helpful, and we got this property back. That's the first bit of news. The second bit of news, some of you who may be familiar with Ateret Cohanim would know that we have 10 families living in the most important Jewish neighborhood in Jerusalem called Kidmat Zion. It is east of the Mount of Olives. It is opposite Abu Dis, that was going to become the Palestinian capital. And in the face of the Palestinian Parliament House, opposite Abu Dis, a few minutes away from the old city, in the corridor they want, we have 10 families. We've been working for 19 years trying to build a neighborhood, or at least get approvals to build the neighborhood. Well, quietly during the war, when there's a lot of bigger and other things taking place in Gaza, we got approvals to build 380 units in Kidmat Zion. The ball is now finally rolling to build, without a doubt, the most significant, strategic, important neighborhood to be built in Jerusalem that will define Jerusalem since 1967 in Kidmat Zion. So any talk of dividing Jerusalem and having a corridor, which is what the Arabs wanted, from Abu Dis going to the old city. Remember, I want to remind all of you, the left-wing prime ministers, and even someone who was meant to be on the right wing, someone called Olmert, I believe his name was, who said, we're sick and tired of wars. They were ready to hand away part of the Kotel, 5 of the 7 main gates, the corridor, including Ir David, the Mount of Olives. That was meant to be handed away. It was only because Arafat, Yamach Shamoy, who said no to the deal in the year 2000 and said, everyone said, no, 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 we've got it in our hands. But today there's going to be a Jewish neighborhood built in Abu Dis, opposite Abu Dis, in a place that we refer to as Kidmat Zion. So for those who may not understand or realize that the government has sometimes involvement in what we're doing, and credit where credit is due, approvals have now been given and the ball is rolling. Something else about the government, because I don't know how many of you realize it, there is no Arab East Jerusalem. Now, obviously, Judy and anyone that's been on tour is familiar with this, but there's 215,000 Jews. I'll say it again in case someone didn't quite get the Australian accent. 215,000 Jews are living today in East Jerusalem. The government has done huge things since 1967. Ramot, Ramat Shlomo, Ramat Eshkol, French Hill, Pisgat Zev, Neve Yaakov, Gilo, Givat Musuar, Mon HaNetziv, Har Choma. All the government. What the government hasn't done, they've never worried about the heart of Jerusalem. And that's where Ateret Cohanim and the Jewish people have to come into play. If we are going to keep Jerusalem in Jewish hands, then that heart of Jerusalem, the old city and the area around the old city, which is maybe 5 to 8% of the whole of East Jerusalem, that's the focus of our work and should be the focus of the Jewish world. One thing I can tell you, it's the focus of the Arab world, which is why they call this the El Aqsa flood. Now, the 7th of October, to be honest and fair, I don't think should define us. My identity as a Jew is never going to be defined by anti-Semitism and someone hating me. I am defined as a Jew because God gave me the Torah, because I am from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I came out of Mitzrayim. I was given the Torah, and I'm connected for all the positive, great reasons, and that's my identity as a Jew. That being said, there are defining moments in Jewish history, in Jewish life. L'havdil, the 9th of Av, when the whole state of Israel was destroyed and the temple was destroyed. L'havdil, there are other dates in Jewish history which, are important. In 1948, that was the Hey Be'iyar, was a transition moment. The 7th of October is another one of those times where it was a national seismic change. We're talking about a rupture of Jewish life. I call it, I don't know whether anyone's familiar with the terminology ECT, electroconducive something treatment. I happen to unfortunately know something about it from someone in my family. It doesn't matter, but it was a miracle. But I think that the 7th of October for me was the reset button, like an ECT reset, national ECT reset button. That's what happened. It was a wake-up call on the 7th of October. The shock, the brutality, the barbarism, the catastrophe, the massacre unseen since the Shoah, of such proportions, it's unheard of. The level of depravity, the sexual violence, the decapitation, the burning. Someone took a head back to Gaza. I don't know whether you saw it, taking a head back to Gaza and tried to sell it for $10,000. What type of people, not even people are we talking about here? The depravity was another level. The level of support by some of the Gazans, I don't know what percentage, but the fact that they were calling their families and proud of what they just did, that level is something unheard of. The level of shock and the realization of the false messiahs was another reason why this day was a massive reset button for us. And of course, the level of worldwide anti-Semitism, hatred, I think we'd probably add to that hypocrisy and ignoring the truth of what happened on the 7th of October is another reason why that day is a day of huge importance for the Jewish people, although not defining who I am or we are as the Jewish people. So where does all of this start? I'm not going to be part of any tribunal that's going to be investigating everything. I'm just a simple Jew involved in important things in Jerusalem. And I can say from my simple understanding, you can't start with Netanyahu's last government. You have to go back to the beginning of Oslo, maybe even before that, to understand the Arab world. Oslo spoke about land for peace. It spoke about a two-state delusion, not a two-state solution, a two-state delusion. It spoke about slapping God in the face and saying, we don't want your land of Israel. This son of Abraham is prepared to give the other son of Abraham land that you've given the Jewish people. What happened from Oslo was all about trusting the Arab world. They will change their education. They will love the Jewish people. They will, and we of course ignored that education. We ignored the United Nations. We ignored UNRWA. David Bedin has been talking and screaming for years about UNRWA, the schools, the camps, the workshops, the people involved with Hamas. Now, today, we know it's thousands. It's not just one or two people. It's thousands connected, involved, helping. We thought that by giving jobs, give the Arab jobs, give them money, they will be happy. That's what we were told. That was the concept. The geniuses, the generals, some politicians, based on intelligence reports, give them jobs, don't upset them. They'll be happy if they've got jobs and money and they're coming in. They're not getting information to take back. No. This is good for them. They're socially, they'll be happy. They'll have employment. Everything's okay. What else did we think was okay? Just on the off chance that there's a problem, how about we build a wall? How about we add some barbed wire? How about we have a few cameras every so often to see what's going on? You see, all of this, and the Iron Dome, which, by the way, is phenomenal, and thank God we've got it. But when you think that all of that together means that they'll never attack, it'll be okay, we can make peace, we were totally brain dead for all of these years since Oslo, politically, army, intelligence, conceptual failures. And I want to add something else to what I just told you. We didn't react and see with our eyes simple, singular acts of the same ilk. I don't know how many of you know, but there was a family in Elon Moreh in 2002, the Gavish family. They were massacred. A family was massacred. No different from what we saw on the 7th of October. Many of you for sure would remember, because it was much closer to us, in March on Shabbat, remember the Friday evening in Itamar, like Elon Moreh, in Itamar, the Fogel family was massacred. A baby in a cot. What type of human being, animal, destroys, kills, wipes out a baby in a cot? You can disagree, you can hate. To wipe out a baby, where was the reaction? We didn't react. Why? Let's think about this for a second. Michigan settlers, Itamar, Elon Moreh, it's settler. It's not the 7th of October where it's suddenly big. And I don't speak to God directly. I'm not even sure whether I get through indirectly. But we could all imagine God's looking down and saying, hello, what, you don't see who you're dealing with? You don't understand what's happening just because they're living in Itamar, you have to treat it differently. I must tell you a funny, it's sort of like a funny story. I was on a plane many years ago. I don't remember the year. I do remember I was going from Florida to New York, and I was sitting on the plane next to a lady from Alabama. She thought I had a funny accent, and I thought she had a funny accent, but she'd never met a Jew before. So I thought, okay, we've got some time. I'll give her the whole of Jewish history the way that Daniel Luria speaks about the Jewish history. It was a wonderful conversation. It was interesting. Now, that week, I remembered, and now I remember, there were 70 missiles that came from the Gaza Strip into Netivot, Shderot, etc. So I'm talking to her about, the peace treaty and the Oslo and blah, blah, blah. And this week there were 70 missiles. She said, did you just say 70 missiles? For the life of her, and I remember her face, she couldn't comprehend one missile landing in the town square of Alabama. And if all of you think about this for a second, not one person in Australia, I came from the exile in Australia, not one person in Australia, not the government, would accept a single missile landing in the town square of Adelaide, Perth, Sydney. They'd destroy the country the day after. Yet we became silent to such a point where hundreds of thousands of missiles were raining down because We didn't react the way we should have to that very first missile because of conceptual failures. We didn't react to the buses being blown up, to the cafes. Do you remember when Israel reacted a little bit stronger? Who remembers? I'll tell you, don't worry about not asking the question. It's when they hit the dolphinarium in Tel Aviv. The ladies and children in Gush Katif, not so important. The missiles in Netivot and Sderot doesn't elicit a huge response. The bombing in Netanya, the dolphinarium, that's another story. And Israel reacted differently. For some strange reason, we've been always differentiating between the Jew here and the Jew there, between the city here and Tel Aviv. I think there's been a very, very big wake-up call ever since then, and especially on the 7th of October. We had to go to the 7th of October for us to maybe realize that we didn't wake up when we should have beforehand. Now, I want to read you something now. Once again, it's not I don't need you to answer anything. I think it'll become very clear what I'm reading to you. Inside the houses, I saw mutilated and burned bodies of the victims of the massacre, and the burned body of a woman tied to a window. They slaughtered the school teacher together with his wife and mother and cut the lawyer, I'm not going to say the name, to pieces with their knives. They smashed the children's heads and cut off their hands. On Saturday, another quote, when the atrocities commenced in all their horror, the so-and-so family was among the first to suffer, most of its members being slaughtered like sheep. I could keep on going, and some of you are probably saying to yourself, I know it's something shocking. I read the same things. You did not read the same things, because what I just read to you now had nothing to do with the 7th of October. What I read to you just now were the massacres and the pogroms of Jews in 1920 and in 1928-29. I could have kept on reading 36, 37, and 38. Think about that for a second. This is before the state of Israel. This is before Yesha. It's before any of those things. This has nothing whatsoever to do with the poor refugees. Of course, the world forgets about the Jewish refugees. It's nothing to do with Yesha, settlers, land, nothing to do with it. I don't know how many of you realize it. You know the count that we have on Yom HaZikaron, 25, now it's unfortunately a lot more, soldiers that are killed that we commemorate on Yom HaZikaron. Does anyone know when this started? It doesn't start in 1948. Do you know when Israel decided to count the people killed? They decided to make the very first person a Jew, a Zionist, someone who bought back land in the old city of Jerusalem and was killed because he was a Jew trying to live quietly in Yerushalayim. The number one on that list is Rabbi Avram Shlomo Zalman Suref. Check me up if you don't believe me, but it's true. So let's understand that this has nothing to do with 1940 onwards. There's a lot of hatred, as I said in the very beginning, this El Aqsa war, and the topic is, this is a war of inheritance, a religious war between the sons of Abraham that don't get along. Now, of course, the big question is, and I hope you're all still with me, the big question is, what about the day after? Everyone is talking about it. Well, what are we going to do? Let's first understand a few basics. There's no difference between Hamas, the PA, those in Judea and Samaria. It's all the same. I will admit that there are some snakes that bite you like, hey, with a venom, and they're straight into you. And there are other snakes that come along quietly and give you a little bit of a hug, and they crush you slowly, but they both kill you. So there is no difference between what we're seeing, definitely not with the education, definitely not with the incitement, definitely not with the encouragement of terrorism and naming town squares after terrorists and salaries, etc. There's no difference, which is why the Israeli government and the army has been going into Tulkarem, Jenin, Shem, Ramallah, because they know they're dealing with the same thing. Of course, everyone is thinking in the back of their minds, oh my God, what happens if the PA en masse with all their weapons also turns it on to Yishuvim? The Israeli government has woken up, thank God, with the 7th of October. So we have millions of Arabs in areas A and a little bit in B, but not so many in areas A. We have millions of Muslims, say 2 million Muslims, Muslim Arabs, many of which, I'm not going to say how many in Gaza, that definitely don't like us. By the way, you should all realize that if we're talking altogether between areas A and Gaza, 4.5 million Arabs, even if you only say, I love that word only, you only say that, oh, well, it's 30% of us, 30% of them hate us. The rest of them, they could live with us in peace and they're like the Sunnis and everything's okay. Even 30% is quite a few Arabs that we have to be concerned about, whether it be 1 million Arabs, and it's usually even more because every survey since the 7th of October has found between 80 to 85% of Arabs in Gaza and in Yesha felt pride what happened on the 7th of October. So given all of that together, I don't think you need to be a genius to recognize that the two-state delusion is in fact a delusion, and there's no way there can be any other state between the river and the sea. I actually like the river to the sea concept. I think I'm actually going to take the concept, river to the sea is the Jewish homeland. In fact, anyone with half a brain understands that the Palestine, they've even stolen the word Palestine, because the League of Nations actually in 1921 in San Remo, it said that Palestine equals the Jewish national homeland. We got to get the word Palestine back. Palestine equals Israel equals Jewish national homeland from the river to the sea. Of course, Daniel Luria is not stupid or blind. And there are millions of Arabs there. So what do you do with Gaza? What do you do with the areas A, etc.? Well, I know that David Friedman has got some idea, and some of it, in fact, even has merit. What I'm hoping, first of all, is the American government wakes up to, and the world wakes up. First of all, forget Oslo, forget the two-state solution. It ain't happening. Now what do? Do you relocate? Do you find other places for them? Do you get investments? Do you get different Arab countries to take them? Do you have a confederation with Jordan? Do you annex? I actually like the AAJ concept. Annex, Aliyah, Jerusalem. They're the three things that at some point are going to happen. Now, when the world is going to wake up to Aliyah, that we need millions of Arabs here to send the right message, birthright, we're already okay, because the Jewish birth rate in Yesha is 5.8. The overall birth rate for the Jewish people is now 3.13, and the Arab birth rate has plummeted to 2.86. None of the left wing can use that anymore. So at some point, we're going to need to, I believe, either annex and give them some type of civil administration. You know how people always talk about, oh, you can't do that. What about apartheid? Well, who says you have to give the right to national voting straight away? What happened to give and take? What happened to serving 3 years as national service if you want to be a citizen and swear allegiance to the state and have a proper education system and not learn about the Nakba and not try and destroy the Jewish state? You want to live in the Jewish state of Israel and give and give and give and not have any hate education? 100%. You can be here. If not, there's 21 Arab countries all around. Anyway, we don't have that much time today to go through every detail of the AAJ plan or what we do with all these Arabs, but it definitely is important. By the way, the J, because Aliyah and Annex is simple. What's the J? Jerusalem. If they want Jerusalem, then what do all of you have to do? What do all of us have to do? We have to build, redeem, revitalize Jewish life, add Jewish life, show strength of conviction, walk the alleyways, not be scared to say that Jerusalem can't be divided. I mean, there are more Arabs selling than Jews buying. How could that be? Why do I have a synagogue in the Yemenite village still lying in disrepute? There shouldn't be one synagogue anywhere in the world standing if my synagogue in the Shiloach is not standing. That's what should be. AAJ, Aliyah, Annex, and Jerusalem. In fact, I've been saying it for years when they talked about the Iron Dome. I never spoke about the Iron Dome. I spoke about the HIJ domes. H, the heavenly dome. You can't just rely on Iron Dome, the army. You need Hashem, you need the army, and you need the Jerusalem Dome. So if we just go back to maybe quickly summarize something, the 6th, the 7th, and the 8th of October, the 6th, we were brain dead and asleep. The 7th, we were woken up. From the 8th onwards, there is huge opportunity. There is hope. There is bravery and courage that is unparalleled. Yes, we wake up every day and there's another soldier, God forbid, may be killed and injured and a prosthesis used for the art, something shocking. But the bravery, the courage, the hope, the opportunity that we're seeing since the 8th of October is something phenomenal. And the unity, forget what's happening on the radio and the television, ulpanim, the stations. Most of them are not worth a pinch of salt. Really. And some of the politicians are also maybe not worth a pinch of salt. I love the Israeli government, but sometimes they have to learn to listen to each other, work together. Look at the nation. Look what's happening in a beautiful tank. Religious, non-religious, singing together in a tank, Lecha Dodi and Kabbalat Shabbat. Think about that for a second. The unity which is seen in Gaza and around the country, restaurants becoming kosher so that all soldiers can get food that they give them. Thinking of the other, I've never seen anything like this in 30 years. People going to soldiers' offices and cleaning up. People picking up cars that are in some down south and up north in bases to give back to the parents. Looking after the soldiers, everything what we're seeing today is phenomenal from that aspect of view. Not only that, but I think there's even a return to our Mekorot, who we are as Jews. It was a wake-up call, not just for Israel, but for Jews around the world. They're now talking in terms of people are putting on tefillin, the number of tzitzit that are being worn by the religious. I'm not even doesn't matter if they become religious, it's not important. But the Jewish neshama is burning, is calling out today, and it's being expressed by what we're seeing in the soldiers who are putting on tefillin, who are singing the Shabbat songs in the tank, and are putting on the tzitzit. In the Haredi world, there are issues it's not for today, it's another topic, and those changes will happen. They are happening. Of course, you can't enforce such social changes, but it's also happening. Limud Torah is important. Anyway, I've actually even lost total track of my time and where I'm speaking and how long I'm speaking for. And even if is anyone listening? Maybe yes. Is someone there, Judy? Is anyone out there?
I had just muted myself, so I didn't interrupt you because as usual, we could go on listening to you forever. I mean, how many hours have we spent walking the streets of the old city listening?
Do you want me to wind up? Do you want me to wind down or wind off and just finish off and summarize
Well,
something and then have some questions,
we
maybe?
do have some questions.
Okay, so let me just before we get to the questions, let me just more or less finish off an idea, and then we'll give 2-3 minutes to everyone if it's okay. And basically, the connection with Ateret Cohanim is very important here because we've said that this is the El Aqsa war, that they want Jerusalem. We're fighting this war today, literally at our back doorstep. It's not, a kilometer away, 2 kilometers away. It's meters away. We've got Hamas flags and Hamas on our back doorsteps in the Yemenite village. And even though there's more police there and it's been very difficult, remember, a lot of our guards and the men were taken to the war front. And therefore the police recognized what happened and they quickly added tons of police to all our neighborhoods. And that's why the lid has been put on any Arabs trying to do something in Jerusalem all around our families, where we've now got extra border patrol police, extra police in all the areas, and the police are begging us to establish security response teams that we've never had before. That's something that we have to do in Kidmat Zion, Malea, Zaitim, Old City, and also in the Shiloach. Literally on our back doorsteps. And when we show strength of conviction and strength, the Arab world understands it. If you show weakness, they eat you up for breakfast, for heaven's sake. Who thinks that we're not in Europe or not in Australia? This is the wild Middle East. And in the wild Middle East, you got to act like a balabait. Yes, I'm a proud occupier. God gave us the land of Israel. We should never have to apologize for that. And the fact that Purim is around the corner is even better, because we saw how a few individuals ultimately defeated the same type of Amalek who wanted to wipe out the Jewish people. And by the way, the whole story of Purim centers around Jerusalem. I hope you all know that. Purim is only about Jerusalem. It's not really mentioned except for once, but it's all about Jerusalem. Remember, Cyrus said Jerusalem could be rebuilt. Who stops the rebuilding of Jerusalem? Hashverosh. And then there's a whole balagan, 11, 13 year story of Purim. And eventually, of course, we wipe out Amalek. And who is the king that gives the okay to rebuild Jerusalem and the Bet HaMikdash? The son of Esther, Darius II. And I learned this off by heart. If you don't believe me, look up Ezra. In the book of Ezra, it says there King Darius, in chapter 6, I think it is, he says, he's talking to the Jews of Persia, and he says, I hereby make a declaration, what you shall do to these diligent builders of Jerusalem to give them gold, marble, the king's resources, food or something like that. And whoever does not listen to this decree, may his house become refuse and may he be hung from a beam from his house. That's the king of Persia telling the Jews of Persia to help the few Jews that went back to build Yerushalayim. The power of one, the power of a few. We can change the face of Jerusalem and survive in this El Aqsa flood by being together in the ark. I call it the Jerusalem Noahide ark. If we're together as a family in the Jerusalem ark, we will defeat the El Aqsa flood. And on that note, I'm happy to answer any questions. Do you want to read them out to me, or will someone ask them directly? How's it go?
I can start. And first of all, I want to say thank you for injecting such a positive note into what so many of us have been feeling is such a distressing situation. But there, of course, we have Hashem on our side and some very brilliant people like you and others who are working so hard in Israel and outside of Israel, and everything will be well. It will be well. There are a number of questions. I'm going through them, and the first one had to do with American politics, which we can get to at the end if we have time. But Larry Bennock wanted to know, what is your solution? I think you talked about AAJ.
Yeah, I didn't go into details, but and obviously these things takes time. In the short term, obviously, Israel has already said, and God willing, it will happen, that they will have, and they have to have total military control over the whole area. As it is, we've already turned the clock back a little bit in relation to areas A. The same thing has to be with Gaza. We can't allow not 1 kilometer, definitely not 500 kilometers of hate-filled tunnels under Gaza again. It's going to take time to destroy what's there, to understand what's there, to take full control, but that's the first thing that has to take place. The second thing that needs to take place is that we have to have Jewish building in certain parts of Gaza together with the Israeli army and army camps. And we need most respected people within the Arab world. And there are some. I mean, there are people in the Arab Emirates, and there are some Sunni Arabs, for example, that understand that we were given the land of Israel, that do think differently. I'm not saying that every single Arab around the world wants to destroy the Jewish state. That's not the case. And not every Arab is Amalek. There's a lot of Amalek in the Arab world, but it's not every single Arab is Amalek. And therefore, there are plenty of Arabs that we can work with. It's a matter of finding the right people to take some type of civil control, like we have councils here. There can be councils so long as the education, the camps, the terrorism is stamped out, which means we have to have overall control, both of the borders, the army, and obviously of things, we can't allow education or supporting terrorism to take place under any circumstances. So that's in relation to Gaza Strip. In relation to Judea and Samaria, I have to agree with the left wing here. I do agree with the left wing. We have been remiss ever since 1967. But my solution is annex. And it's not a problem. And first of all, you can definitely annex areas C and B. That's not a question. because there's 150,000 Arabs, and they wouldn't take full citizenship in any case, and they can vote for local elections, but definitely not for the national elections. And there's nothing wrong with that. They have to also serve 3 years of national service. So that's for sure a no-brainer. You can't leave it as a question mark area. We've got legal opinions that will back it up. It's our land. God gave it to us. There's nothing wrong with occupying it. There's nothing wrong with settling our land. We are the indigenous people of the land of Israel, and that has to be screamed from every rooftop. The Arabs have stolen the word indigenous, Aborigines, and Palestine. Enough already. Anyway, I hope that's the answer to the question. Yes.
That's a great answer to the question. I have personally a problem with using the word annex. I know Israelis use the word annex. And just to clarify, the legal definition of annexation is to take land not belonging to you. In this case, the land that was reclaimed in 1967 had been illegally occupied by Jordan and was reclaimed by Israel at that point. And so there's legally not an annexation necessary. And I hope that isn't an insulting aside.
Not in the slightest. Point taken, and you are 1,000% correct. I just can't think of another word. People don't like the word conquer. I mean, once upon a time, we used to think the word conquering was a good word. Joshua conquered the land. He liberated the land. He won the land. Words have changed today. Even settlers. My great-grandmother was a settler in Kfar Hasidim. Today, you use the word settler. Oy vey, oy vey. What's wrong with settling your own land, for heaven's sake? The world's gone crazy.
100%. So Richard Gelber has a question. The PA has been establishing communities in Area C on the Green Line, Seam Line, without the authorities doing anything about it. The EU is facilitating this. Any suggestions about how to stop and reverse this? I know this is not your old city bailiwick, but do you have any ideas for us?
I don't have more ideas than what's taking place today. There are good people in the best positions possible. There's no solution that you can say, let's do something today and tomorrow will be fixed. Having Smotrich where he is in charge of parts of the civil administration, you can't get better than that politically. There's groups of people that have been working for years. My mind has gone blank and I apologize. That work legally, that are finding out everything. They've got all the information. No.
Regavim?
Regavim, thank you. Sorry. Regavim. I mean, I've got no better ideas than Regavim. They're doing all the right things. Smotrich is doing the right things, but changes don't happen overnight. We've got the best right-wing government you could ever possibly hope for, and yet the wheels turn ever so slowly. They're doing the maximum they can. Listen, I hope that we throw out UNRWA from Israel. I mean, this is an anti-Semitic group that is full of hate, and they shouldn't exist full stop. But you can't throw them out from today till tomorrow. People have been trying for years to do it. Maybe now, with so much proof that we've got from the 7th of October onwards and under the UNRWA buildings, maybe now there's more of a justification to go ahead and do it. You need the right people in government. I believe we have those people in government, but it doesn't happen so quickly, unfortunately. And we don't just snap our fingers and things happen. Even the work of Ateret Cohanim, we've got 1,000 Jews now living in the old Jewish quarter. It took 43 years. We've got a whole neighborhood now that's going to be built in Kidmat Zion, which is a miracle, and that's taken 19 years. Things take time. But when you have the opportunity to put up a mezuzah and see 100 kids playing in a yard or in a playground, it makes up for all the agmat nefesh and the heartache that sometimes I have because I can't wake up the Jewish world. Maybe the few people, whoever's on this Zoom, together we can wake up the Jewish people, because you don't need all of the Jewish people. The Hashmonaim, the Maccabees, were not the bulk of the Jewish people. It was a bunch of 5 people, ended up being a few hundred people, then a few thousand people. Beseder, most of the nation are apathetic. It's always the few powerful, dynamic people like AFSI, by the way, and like Ateret Cohanim and like other wonderful organizations that are doing what needs to be done to make the relevant changes.
Okay. Helene, I had asked if you wanted to ask the next question.
I am looking. There were a number of questions actually about the fact that the Arabs continue to seize areas C that there's building, and that Regavim has reported on it, but the Israeli government does not seem to
very
have
slow,
the
not doing
mentality
enough.
or the resources available. Is there another way to be dealing with this?
I don't believe so. I mean, that's one way to deal with it. The other way to deal with it is something that the younger generation is doing, which I'm more than happy about. And they're doing the same things as what the Arabs are doing in some ways. They're going to state land and they're setting up farms, and the so-called hilltop youth. I'm not saying that everyone should go out. I'm not talking about breaking the law, God forbid. But in a situation where people are grabbing and setting up outposts, then if the government is slow, sometimes the government needs a little bit of a push. Unfortunately, sometimes in the previous governments, what we were seeing is that the civil administration would go after the one Jew that's got some hilly outcrop, and they'd let thousands of dunams go by some Arab and doing nothing. There has to be still a greater switch in some of the lower level government or civil administration jobs to see that change. I said earlier that there's been a massive conceptual failure, and it's all got to do with this also. How do we treat the Arabs? How do we treat people that are breaking the law? Acting like a sovereign body. In a very small example, I'll give you something it'll a perfect example actually. In what the world says is East Jerusalem, a neighborhood that you've all heard of called Silwan. I call it Shiloh, the Yemenite. The Yemenite Jews were there before any Arab was living there, but it doesn't matter. Let's call it, for the argument's sake, Silwan, East Jerusalem. The government didn't act there. They weren't there. They weren't putting parks and gardens and light rails and guardrails and lighting and footpaths, nothing. If you don't invest, if you're not a balabait, if you're not an owner, you effectively divide the city. Comes along Ateret Cohanim. We move back into the neighborhood legally by Ateret Cohanim. People around the world buy, we just facilitate. Families move into that. There's 40 families there. There's a kollel, there's a yeshiv, beit knesset, etc. And we force the government to invest. We schlep sovereignty. When you show sovereignty that you're a balabait, everything is different. For that to happen, you need the right people in the right places to make those changes. The police, they're starting to make that conceptual change. Maybe not right across the board, maybe not everyone. Maybe there needs to be getting rid of some of the top brass because they're conceptually still caught. I mean, some of the generals today that are fighting in Gaza were the same generals that had the same concept all these years. That's why it sickens me to listen to some of these TV stations, these ulpanim, where these so-called experts are talking about Gaza. They're the ones that said, can't go in, don't go in, let them go, give them jobs, we'll be okay, Iron Dome. And they're the ones giving. It has to be a massive change. Once again, these things don't happen overnight. So it can be frustrating, but we are seeing the changes. We're seeing it on the ground in Jerusalem, and God willing, we'll see it in more and more things, because I think as a Jewish people, we've woken up to the reality of the two-state delusion. Nobody wants an Arab state with these type of people digging tunnels from a few kilometers away from Ben Gurion station. So, God willing.
God willing. You mentioned that the police are changing a bit. What do you attribute that to? I know there was a question about it. I don't know whose it was.
You kill my friend, I'm not going to like you.
Yeah.
You rape my next door neighbor's daughter, I'm not going to like you. You kill a fellow police officer and border patrol policeman, you're my enemy. There's been a lot of policemen, a lot of border patrol policemen, including Rose Lubin from Atlanta. She was murdered just outside the Flowers Gate. We've got now a rose garden inside the Flowers Gate that we're in the process of finishing off. When they see that their own have been killed by these Arabs, suddenly the chest goes out, the shoulders go up, and they're ready for just let me at him. I told you, I think I said at the beginning, I don't remember, but there was usually over the years, we've had thousands of Molotov cocktails thrown at our families. Now, not one Molotov cocktail should be accepted. That was the concept. And for years, we call up the police, we call the Border Patrol police. It's noted down. Maybe they'll chase it up. Maybe they'll see a camera. Maybe. Nothing ever happens. 2 months ago, whatever it was, 2 Arabs threw Molotov cocktails. We had police in the area. They just shot and killed them. End of story. There's a different mindset now. Now, is it going to last? I don't know. Are we going to treat Ramadan differently? Are we going to be scared what's going to happen if we stop, if we only allow, certain 50-year-old Arab women to go? I don't know what they're going to allow. You can't get better than Ben Gvir and Smotrich to have the type of concepts, to change the concepts. Whether Netanyahu and people in the Likud are the right people to change all the concepts, I don't know what's going to be. There's only 2 people that know the future, as I've said before. They're prophets and fools. I'm not a prophet and I'm no fool. So I don't know the future. We can only try. We hope. We do what we can. And we pray that our leaders will learn, from this wake-up call. We'll be given a huge opportunity to restart a lot of things. That we are the Jewish people. We have rights in this land. We don't need to apologize. We don't need to hand anything away. It's our land. Be proud of it and stuff the world. Let the world say what they want. Me and my grandchildren are going to be here in 1,000 years' time, maybe not 1,000 years' time, but all of us are going to be here, and there'll be bylines in history books.
Yeah, bylines in history books. Talking about books, one of the big roadblocks to lasting understanding is the educational system that the Arab children have to endure
Okay.
under all of the groups. It's Hamas, it's the PA, it's everybody. It's absolutely shocking. What can the Israeli government do to change that, to get to stop funding any kind of education that is genocidal? What do you suggest?
Well, I mean, Netanyahu, there's one thing when you say something, there's something else altogether when you put it into action. Netanyahu has said all the right things. He said that we're going to be in control of the education. We're never going to allow any authority to come up again in Gaza, etc. Now, it's nice that he said it, but he has had the PA right under our noses with the same education.
Yeah.
Money for terrorists. I mean, there's a lot of things that it's not like he hasn't known about. Nothing new is in Gaza. Yes, it's one thing to be able to see every house with a map and a mortar and rockets and missiles and tunnels. Okay, it's more shocking, but we've known about this even under our noses. So we have to demand that all of these things take place, take charge of the education, and that can only happen if they're under your full control. I mean, we also have to worry about what's being spoken in Jerusalem. There are schools in Jerusalem that has the same type of thing, and even that needs to change. So we have the right people there. We just are not putting it enough into action. But I'm hoping and praying that the 7th of October didn't just wake up the left wing. It woke up the right wing just as much. And therefore, we all need to do what needs to be done at every level. The way we talk to people, unity, the way we act in Jerusalem, the way we act towards the Arabs, the way we handle slap God and not slap God in his face. There's many things that we've been woken up for. We have to take advantage of the opportunity that has been given to us, God willing.
Willing. So we have some hands that have been raised, and I'm going to ask Tag El Kazim, who's been waiting very patiently, to unmute because obviously he wants to ask his question himself, not leave it to me.
Pleasure.
And
Pleasure.
I'm hitting ask. I'm asking you to unmute.
Yeah, right. Thank you very much.
You're very
I want to take you to the religious context of Al-Aqsa or Jerusalem. And this comes in Surah Al-Isra that goes سبحان الذي أسرى بعبده ليلا at night من المسجد الحرام إلى المسجد الأقصى الذي باركنا حوله.
Oh, I'm sorry, Tag. You're speaking a language that most of us don't understand.
Oh,
You don't understand what
no, can you get me now?
I hear
you
you.
speak.
What language
You
are you
speak in English, I understand you, yes.
Oh, right. No, I was just reciting an ayah in the Quran that created all this confusion, really. The background from a Muslim
Ah.
perspective. It is an ayah in the Quran that says we have transported the body of Prophet Muhammad from Mecca to Jerusalem at night. And we blessed all around the spot where he landed. So the trip was at night. It was in body, which is almost impossible to go from Mecca to Jerusalem at night and back, flying. And unless that context is countered, then in the minds of the Muslims, that this is where Prophet Muhammad landed, and this is where God has blessed the surroundings of where he landed.
I hear what you're saying. First of all, there are some Muslims. There's a lot of things written in the Quran. I'm not an expert of the Quran. There's a lot of things written in the Quran about their attitude towards Jews. In relation to what you specifically read, it actually doesn't say Jerusalem. It talks about El Aqsa. It doesn't say Jerusalem, because Jerusalem is not mentioned any time in the Quran. It's mentioned 699 times in the Tanakh, but not once in the Quran. And this dream that Muhammad had until about 1,000 years ago, you actually are correct, even less, until about 1,200 years, 1,000 years ago, correct? Basically, there were many in the Arab world that understood El Aqsa to be the outer mosque in the southern part of Saudi Arabia. He was on a winged horse and he went from Mecca to Medina to the outer mosque. It wasn't even to what we call today Jerusalem. It has become very politicized, and he flew to Jerusalem. But even if he did come to Jerusalem, which he didn't in his dream on a winged horse, and even if he tied his winged horse in his dream to the Kotel, that doesn't make the Kotel theirs. It doesn't mean that we have to hand away sovereignty. There's one thing, Muhammad being here, there's something else altogether. Who has the sovereign rights to this place? We can give freedom of religions and praying to any Arab, any Christian, as the Jews do. But sovereignty is another story. There's never been a Palestinian state here, as you know. There's never been an Arab-Palestinian state. And the only people that have got any real connection to this land are the Jewish people. That's why I keep on talking, and we have to all keep on talking in terms of we are the indigenous people. There's never been a Palestinian Arab state here. There's never been, not Jordan has had an official state from an international level, not at a moral level, historical level, political level, no level, which is why, of course, there was a book that was being sold. If you remember, they sold thousands of copies of the Palestinian history and heritage. I don't know, Mr. El Kazim, whether you bought it, but there was a book being sold. They sold thousands of copies on the internet about the Palestinian history and heritage until the Muslim world threatened Amazon and told them to stop selling it. Do you know why they told them to stop selling? Because all the pages were blank. There were blank pages in this book, and they sold thousands of copies. It was a publicity stunt to tell the world, calm down, Arab world. You have been blessed with many lands, but it ain't the land of Israel. The land of Israel, from the river to the sea, belongs to the 9.5 tribes. Today, let's call it the state of Israel. And that's the way it's going to be.
Thank you, Daniel. We have one last question. Robin Ticker's had her hand up, and then we're going to have to come to a close. Robin, would you like to unmute yourself?
Yes, thank you so much. I wanted to ask Mr. Luria, what's his reaction to Tali Gottlieb, who was talking about the deep state in Israel. I don't know if you heard her.
I apologize. I can only talk about something that I know and have heard properly. I don't know anything about this. I know that I know a little bit about her. She's very loud. She's very outspoken. I'm not sure about all conspiracy theories just in general. That's not where I come from, but there may be something behind some of the things, but I don't know specifically what she's spoken about. So I apologize. I can't make a proper comment on that.
Just what you mentioned, what I just listened to today, was saying that even though there's a right-wing government, but the deep state is really not allowing them to do what they have to do.
Listen, there are a lot of people out there that are first of all anti-Bibi, and it doesn't matter what Bibi says, they'll just be anti-Bibi, anti the government. I mean, there's a prime minister, I think he was a prime minister, called Ehud Barak, who is working surreptitiously behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, with money, with other people, with demonstrations, talking overseas on various stations at a time of war. I just don't get how someone can do that when 95% of the country, including most of the left wing, is united to have this subversity and things happening behind the government, just to topple a government or topple Bibi, or because of hatred. It's a shame, it's a tragedy. And I would have thought that people would have woken up with the 7th of October with a certain amount of decency and normality and proper behavior, as Jews should behave towards one another. Are there a lot of people lying deep down under controlling things? I'm sure there are a lot of bad people in bad places, and God willing, they'll be found out, and we will march on and do whatever is necessary. The messianic donkey may be sitting down from time to time, but he's moving forward. Don't you worry. Hakol beseder.
Daniel, you always leave us enlightened and encouraged, and this is absolutely no exception to that rule. I'm looking forward very, very much to seeing you in person in Jerusalem, and seeing, I cannot believe that there's really going to be such a development in Kidmat Zion. We have to go see what that's about. And I'm sure you have some other.
There's plenty to do. What I will say is there's plenty to do. And if anyone in the group wants to be in touch, you've got the information there. If anyone's coming to Israel, we have amazing tours. There's tons of projects and things that need to be done. If any of you know of people that want involvement, for there be the level of investments, and there's no shortage of that, to the level of helping create still playgrounds, this parking lot area that we've now taken over, that we have to do something with, or there are security response teams, be in touch with either me directly or via you, Judy. I look forward to seeing all of you in Israel, either short term or long term. But biyachad nenatzeach, together we'll be victorious, to hold on to the land of Israel, to our beautiful Jewish heritage, and to Jerusalem.
B'ezrat Hashem. Shalom, shalom to all. If people want to stay on a little bit longer and talk